Hello, friends. So, we are going to be discussing violence against women and how the bro code uh, tends to sustain the culture of violence against women. And before I start, please note that I'm not accusing all men in participating in this, um, but it's just something that needs to be discussed because we have seen a great increase in violence against women. Over the last couple years. So, gender based violence has its roots um, in the perceptions of women as victims, as lesser beings than men, and who must be subjugated by men. The battle against gender violence itself is spoken of publicly in the media when something happens. You've heard cases where a college student was raped, or a woman in a foreign country, Middle Eastern country, was gang raped. So it is spoken about, especially when a tragedy happens. But we're not seeing too many discussions happening at home with. And of course, we don't know what private discussions parents are having with their boys. But what I mean by that is that we're not seeing the public outcry of families and parents, saying that more needs to be done to teach young men better treatment of women. We're not seeing any men rise up and start an organization or some type of mentoring program that specifically addresses how boys in middle school, high school, or young men, college age young men, are to handle situations, heated situations where violence can result in an interaction with a girl or a woman. And of course, teenagers don't focus on that. That's not usually their focus for relationship with girls. But it begins with the jokes, joking about a girl's body when she walks by, or making, jokes about a girl being skinny or fat or pretty or ugly, or joking about what he would do to her if he could. So the bro code, right? The bro code, um, it's like an unspoken, a silent message saying, that none of the guys are going to speak about it. You're not going to tell on your bro for doing this, or you're not going to rat him out. So even if in many instances a guy's pursuing a girl and his friends know about it, that he likes this girl, or they took a bet, or there's some type of game going around, and the girl thinks that the guy's being genuine, has a genuine interest in her. Even if he asks one of his guy friends, hey, tell me about him, is he a nice guy? Even if his guy friend knows that he's a jerk, knows that he's just playing with her because of some type of bet, or knows that he just wants to sleep with her, and he would still lie to her and vouch for his friend, right? And tell him that he's a nice guy when he knows what his friend is really up to. So this starts, at teenage years, and goes all the way to adulthood, even in marriage. For a lady who's engaged to a guy, she may ask his friends if he's really a nice guy, and they know all the things that he's doing. They know that he's already sleeping with somebody else. They know that he has many other girls that he's fooling around with. But even knowing that they are engaged to be married, his friends will more than likely lie to her and say, yeah, he's a really nice guy. They will not tell on him. And that is that root cause. That is that underlining of toxic masculinity, right? Where women are being sexually objectified, men are emotionally stoic, or in many cases they use intimidation or violence to resolve conflict, to gain control, or feel some type of power. So sexual harassment, and it happens to both parties, but mostly happens to women. And I'm sorry to say, um, in the fields of engineering, the fields of medicine, the science fields where you usually see it being dominated mostly by men, women who join that field tend to experience a lot of sexual harassment and even violence, right? Even when I was taking, when I was young and I was in driving school and we had to watch those long videos before you can get your license, they talked about how men, college age boys and men, one of the main cause, one of the number one causes of injuries to men is car accidents. That's probably why car insurance for young men or tends to be more expensive. But yeah, they've always said that one of the number one causes of injury for men is car accidents. But while for women, one of the number one causes for injury is domestic violence. Isn't that something? I guess men are associated with being more risk takers, right? They speed more. But, I guess girls do it too. But I'm just, pointing out the fact that it is known statistically that men get injured mostly, usually to car accidents, and women usually to domestic violence, which is surprising. So, what I'm noticing is that within the last couple of years, I've seen so many astonishing news articles and the news media publishing atrocious crimes, like heinous, awful things that men have done to women and also the children because of domestic violence. So men continue to view women as something that is only valuable. And not all men, but when we're talking about violence against women, gender-based violence, we're talking about men that view women as something that is only valuable when it's in relation to him, not just because this is a human being, a woman that deserves respect. By that I mean that guys make all kind of jokes when they're with each other about a woman, about nasty things, comments about a woman, raping a woman. Sometimes they make jokes about that, or tying a woman down and things like that. But if a husband finds out that his supervisor is mistreating his wife, right? If a husband finds out that some guy at work is sexually harassing his girlfriend or his wife, if a dad finds out that his teenage daughter or his college daughter was mistreated by a boy or was touched inappropriately or was sexually assaulted, and here comes the fury. But that's the only time that it really really matters. So unless the woman is his mother, his daughter, his sister, it doesn't matter. It's one of those, they turn their faces and it's not my problem, it's not my business. So they can actually compartmentalize those emotions, and that's how you see the bro code, you know, sustain or protect violence against women, because a lot of men, not all, but a lot of men tend to, if they see that their guy friends are doing something, many men can know that their guy friends are having affairs and won't say anything even though they know it's wrong. Many men can see that the guy friends is in his 40s and is dating some, you know, 19-year-old or something, and they think it's a wonderful thing, or, sometimes even younger, and they won't say anything. So by men having these private meetings with each other, joking about women's bodies, teenage boys, and no parent, no adult is stepping up and say, hey, this is not appropriate, because it can lead to you thinking that you can dominate a woman, subjugate her, abuse her, and so on and so forth. But allowing the jokes, right? The rape jokes going unaddressed, laughing at beating a woman, it kind of enables the men participating in this to get closer to being abusive. So a lot of the friends that see a girl, a guy in the hallway at school or something, just, do something really naughty or disrespectful to a woman or slapping another girl. These are vehicles, these are, ways that gender violence is being tolerated by men. It's like a complicity. And the only way that that can be broken and improved in society is by men standing up and speaking up against it. And when I talk about this, sometimes I think about just the college scene, because we hear so much about it. The the girl that got raped, by a frat boy. Like, you hear so much about her, whether she went to a frat party or, something happened. It's like you hear it so often. And that goes across the spectrum, all backgrounds, all cultures, all races. I'm not just talking about one specific group. It's just we're talking about violence, gender based violence, or primarily violence against women. So a young college girl, accuses a guy of sexually assaulting her, and his friends know about it. His friends were there, but they're not going to talk about it. It doesn't matter because they're not supposed to tell on each other. None of them is interested in helping this girl. None of them is interested in telling the truth unless they all get arrested and and start getting questioned. One of them might might crack and tell the truth or whatever, but for the most part they're not going to come forth and say what happened. So none of them will break the bro code. So it becomes like an unspoken rule that requires men to stay silent about the other, even if it's in the face of violence, sexual abuse, right? But I think that also women play a role in that. And I'm not saying that they deserve it, but I think that, when you see these women in these magazines, in these fashion magazines, how they pose, how they allow these magazines to display them, how they, have all these sexually explicit scenes and all these sexually explicit poses and things like that, is that they kind of contribute to men viewing them in such a manner. So not saying that those women deserve to be treated in any kind of negative way, but I'm just saying that women are not setting the standards to say, hey, I don't deserve to be spoken to like this, or to say I don't deserve to be treated like that. One thing that really bothers me a lot is when you hear that a woman was sexually assaulted, and then you hear, some men make comments like, "Oh, she was wearing a tight dress, or she was wearing this, or she was wearing that." Like, just because she was wearing this doesn't mean you have the right to go over there and touch her. So I think a lot of the responsibilities, from what I'm seeing, is is in the men, and they pick up the habits of the bro code at a young age. But I'm also interested in seeing women just kind of put a bit more demand on their fair treatment by setting the example of how they want to be spoken to and how they want to be treated, because we see a lot of times where culturally, in the culture, in the college scene, even after the college scene, the young men are like trying to collect as many pennies as they can, trying to brag about how many girls they sleep with, that it kind of puts the girls in a position where now they have to compete against each other. Something that is just so demeaning is when you hear these songs about women saying my is better than yours, or I'm better at this than you are. It's just like now it's making the women compete against each other because of the psychological play, right? The games that these guys are playing by trying to get as many women as they can, trying to sleep around with as many girls as they can, to the point where now girls have to demean themselves and speak nasty things about their own body and the things that they can do to compete with each other for these guys' attention. So, and that promulgates, right? It really, really does steer the violence against women. Um, but there's been a lot of news of awful things happening to women, and then when the guy just completely loses control, not only does he hurt the woman, but he also ends up hurting the children. And just to clarify what I said earlier about, some guys may know that a man is cheating and won't say anything. I also do understand the boundaries behind that because, a lot of people believe that, hey, you got to stay out of married people business. And in most cases, a guy is not going to do anything about knowing that his guy friend has a side chick. But what I'm specifically talking about is when other men know that their friend is beating his wife or beating his girlfriend or just physically abusive to his lady, his domestic partner, and they won't say anything and they won't do anything about it. And again, one of the things that you hear about, because when I was going through it, and that's one of the reasons I'm making this video, is that when you're crying out for help, or you're seeking help, people will tell you, oh, don't put your marriage business out there, or work on your marriage or whatever, and you think that you have to stay because you have to, maybe you're not doing something right as a woman, so you have to keep working on your marriage. So this is not a straightforward thing. because I know some men, and I'm not making this video to say that all men are in the bro code and all men are enabling violence against women. But what I'm saying is that I know it's hard because sometimes you see a woman being abused and you want to say something, and you know it may backfire, right? It may turn against you, or the person that you thought you were trying to help will tell you to mind your own business. So it's just like kind of a double-edged sword because many men, especially those that are in their tight knit bro code, may not even do anything because that's his friend and that's his wife, that's his girlfriend, and he's just trying to protect her or control her or whatever. But and for the men that see this happening, even though if that woman is not his sister, his daughter, he's just that's his friend, and his friend has been with that lady for a long time. Even if he sees him even physically beat that woman, or just knows that he's abusing her, in many cases he won't say anything. Not all the time, but in many cases he won't. And sometimes when you want to do something, you feel like you need to mind your own business. And I experienced that myself as a woman going through, being a victim of domestic violence. Is that when I was telling, and I didn't tell anybody during the process because I was told, keep your marriage business at home. And so women suffer so silently because of that. But when I finally got out of that situation and I was telling, like one of my professors what I had gone through and how I got to the situation that I was going through and things like that, or one of my brothers, um, very few men that a woman, even if it's just like your guy friend or a friend from work or a guy that you work with and you're telling them what you're going through, a lot of the men won't even say anything. They'll like sit there quietly and shake their heads or say, oh man, I can't believe you did that. When you're telling a woman, how a man abused you domestically, when a woman is talking to another woman, she will be more sympathetic. She'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that to you. How could he? Girl, this, girl, you should have done this, girl, you should have done this. Don't ever, the woman will go in and she'll, advise you, tell you what to do, call a lawyer, do this. But in many cases, when a woman is telling a guy friend or a male friend or, an uncle or something, or just a guy that's close to her, this is what I went through with my ex, they'll just sit there quietly and pretty much just kind of may not all the time, but they may just listen to you respectfully. But many times they'll just dismiss what you're saying, like you're just some type of irrational, vindictive, crazy woman who just is trying to throw a man under the bus. Like even if he doesn't say anything, with his behavior and his silence, he's almost like giving credence to the man and not to the woman who's telling him what she went through, the horrors of how this man treated her, the awful things he said to her, how he, had her under constant threat or was beating her all the time. If he's your friend or he cares about you, he might say something like, oh man, he did that for real. But he's not gonna literally sit there and defend you and say, what he did was wrong, or no, I didn't see that at all. Only one of my brothers that I told this to told me, this guy is a narcissist. This guy apparently has a lot of, issues or whatever. But most of the men that I spoke about this to after the fact literally had like no reaction. Like, they were just so numb, like, I wonder if you're making that up because you're trying to, throw that guy under the bus or something. So this video was pretty much made for that reason, because even if a man is not participating in violence against women, his silence, his behavior to it, his response to it, oftentimes sends the message to other men, like, like it's all right, until it happens to one of his own or his sister or his daughter or something like that. And I also do acknowledge that not all men participate in this, but I would like to see more men stand up and teach the young boys and teach the high school boys and talk more about this. Because, I do see women also hit men. So it kind of goes both ways. And, in many cases, women have to kind of address that as well. But since this video is about the great increase that I'm seeing in the news, the historical violence against women that we know of throughout history, that women have been beaten and raped, and just so many awful things happen to them, whether they deserve it or not, whether they started it or not. So I just wanted to shine a little bit of light on how the bro code, how some men tend to keep that going because they think it's funny to talk about a woman. They think it's funny to talk about her body parts, her butt. They think it's funny to talk about tying a woman up or spanking her, or just things like that. And those discussions need to happen a bit more often. So you all stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you on the next video.